Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are jumping into one of the most intense, most talked about family rivalries in ancient literature, the story of Jacob and Esau. It's just a raw tale of ambition, jealousy, deception, and, well, a divine plan that unfolds in the absolute messiest way possible.
And really, the whole thing kicks off with a question we can all relate to, at least a little bit. What happens when family rivalry goes too far? As we're about to see, the answer here is, it gets pretty destructive.
You know, if you want to understand Jacob's entire life in one word, that word is struggle. Centuries later, the prophet Hosea put it perfectly. Jacob struggled with his brother from the moment he was born, and believe it or not, he would eventually go on to struggle with God himself.
So let's set the stage. We're going to start not with the two brothers, but with their father Isaac. Now, a lot of people see Isaac as just this transitional figure, the link between his famous dad, Abraham, and his even more famous sons. But in this story, he is right at the center of a family that's about to be completely torn apart.
So, Isaac's wife, Rebekah, she's barren for 20 long years. Finally, Isaac prays, and she conceives twins. But this is not some peaceful, happy pregnancy, oh no. The two children fight so violently inside her that she's literally in agony, and she cries out to God asking, "What is happening to me?"
And that desperate question, it leads to a prophecy that is going to change everything. A divine message that will set the entire course for her sons' lives and the fate of nations before they even take their first breath.
And here it is, this is the prophecy. It announces this huge, shocking reversal of how things are supposed to work. In a world where the firstborn son gets everything, this oracle declares that the younger will rule over the elder. This one divine statement just hangs over every single thing that's about to happen. And from the moment they're born, these twins could not be more different. Esau comes out first. He's this rugged, hairy, outdoorsy guy, a real man's man. He's his father Isaac's favorite. Then comes Jacob, quiet, a homebody, clinging to his brother's heel. And he's his mother Rebekah's favorite. This parental favoritism, it's like pouring gasoline on a fire.
Okay, so let's get into the first major showdown between these two. It all revolves around this thing called the birthright. And this is where Jacob's cunning and Esau's impulsiveness collide for the first time.
So what exactly is a birthright? Well, it's way more than just money. Think of it as the ultimate inheritance package. It meant you got a double portion of all the family wealth, and you became the new head of the clan. It was a position of immense honor and power. In this culture, losing it was unthinkable.
So here's how it all goes down. Esau, the hunter, stumbles in from the field completely exhausted and so hungry he actually thinks he's gonna die. And who's there? Jacob, just conveniently cooking up a pot of stew. He sees his chance and makes this ruthless offer. "I'll give you some stew, but you have to sell me your birthright." And Esau, in his moment of desperation, agrees. He trades his entire future for one bowl of lentils.
But here's where it gets really interesting. The story doesn't let Esau totally off the hook. Yeah, Jacob was being a trickster for sure. But the text adds this little detail. So Esau despised his birthright. He's also held responsible for treating this incredible inheritance so casually, like it meant nothing. It shows you this isn't a simple story of a good guy versus a bad guy. It's way more complicated than that.
All right, if you thought that was bad, let's move on to the second act of deception, which is even more dramatic. If selling the birthright was about desperation and opportunity, stealing the blessing, well, that's a cold, calculated conspiracy.
And you have to understand, the blessing was on a whole other level. This wasn't a legal inheritance like the birthright. This was a spiritual one. It was a spoken, prophetic declaration from a father to his heir. And in their world, once it was spoken, it was considered permanent, irreversible. It was believed to literally shape that person's destiny.
So here's the plan, and it's a real masterpiece of deceit. It starts when Isaac, who is now old and blind, asks Esau to go hunt and make him a meal so he can give him the blessing. But Rebekah overhears this, and she is determined that her favorite son Jacob is getting that blessing. So she comes up with this wild scheme. She cooks the meal herself, dresses Jacob up in Esau's clothes, and, get this, she covers his smooth arms and neck with goat skins to make him feel hairy like his brother.
So Jacob goes into his blind father. And even though he can't see, Isaac is suspicious. The voice sounds like Jacob, but the hands feel hairy like Esau's. He's so close to figuring it out, and he asks him point blank, one last time,
Are you really my son Esau?
And Jacob's response? It's just two simple words that seal the deal. For the third time in this whole charade, he looks his blind father in the face and lies. I am. And with that, the deception is complete.
The consequences are just devastating. The blessing Jacob steals is one of incredible prosperity and power, talking about heaven's dew and earth's richness. But when Esau comes back and realizes what's happened, he begs for his own blessing, and there's basically nothing left. What he gets is pretty much an anti-blessing, a future of scarcity, violence, and serving his younger brother.
So this just brings us to the million-dollar question, right? Who is actually to blame in this massively dysfunctional family? And maybe the bigger question is, how on earth can a divine plan, a destiny that's supposed to bless the whole world, come out of such a complete and utter mess? And what's so powerful about this story is that the blame is spread all around. Nobody gets off easy. Isaac played favorites and tried to go against the prophecy. Rebekah was the mastermind who manipulated her husband. Jacob lied repeatedly to his own father. And even Esau is blamed for despising his birthright. Nobody's hands are clean here.
And this really gets to the heart of it all. This story isn't a moral lesson on how to be a good person. Not at all. Instead, it's presented as this powerful example of how a divine plan can work its way through the messy, complicated, and sometimes morally bankrupt actions of human beings.
Because in the end, that prophecy Rebekah received before the boys were even born, it comes true. It just doesn't happen through heroic deeds or righteous living. It happens through ambition, manipulation, favoritism, and straight-up deceit.
And that leaves us with this really challenging question to chew on. The story of this family becomes the foundation for an entire nation. But it's a foundation built on lies and betrayal. So it forces you to ask, can a great destiny, even one that's divinely promised, ever truly be built on such a compromised and deceptive foundation?